Okay, so One Medical is a primary care company in the United States. For the uninitiated that aren't familiar with One Medical, we operate clinics throughout the United States, and we have various consumers and enterprise clients who are able to get their primary care needs met by One Medical clinics, and we have all the technical services and providers under our control, so we can provide some seamless healthcare services for customers. And so why we chose Amundsen is, like all companies, we have an ever-growing data warehouse, but we don't have the tools to enable data discovery within the organization. We have a myriad of Hadoop, Snowflake databases, probably 2 to 3 dozen APIs where we consume data from, and we don't have a structured way of presenting that data. So Amundsen gives us that ability to begin to solve that problem. We also don't have a single source of truth regarding all things metadata. Again, Amundsen comes in handy solving that problem. And the reason why we decided to go on Amundsen is we've seen it successfully used or deployed to other organizations. It's an open source tool that we rely heavily on within our data platform here at One Medical. There are built-in integrations for various tools that we already use. Amundsen's customizable. We also expect Amundsen to easily integrate with our Airflow ecosystem. At One Medical, our data platform is very heavily dependent on Airflow. And so we expect these two systems, as they evolve, both Amundsen and Airflow, to help us achieve our goals a little bit more efficiently. So I want to talk about the deployment first, and Andy's going to go into the implementation of Amundsen here at One Medical. Deployment for us was a bit of a challenge, and that's because we are a healthcare company. We're also a public company. So we have a high bar to meet for security restrictions. Firstly, our deployment follows very similar to what you see with the Amundsen, where we have the front end metadata and Neo4j and search deployed as ECS services within AWS. And we're also using the managed Elasticsearch service. And then moving on to that, to get to that point, we use Terraform as our ISC to deploy Amundsen here at One Medical. And a couple of things I want to call out, things that we've learned that may help others as they go through this planning process is, initially we had to set up meetings with our security department to do audits on Amundsen and the libraries associated with Amundsen. And this is an interesting call out because we did not expect to have to set aside time in our project planning to do this kind of lead work. And so if you're also a public company, it's something to be aware of. And, moving on, if we look at if we were to review the deployment steps or development steps for Terraform here at One Medical, what we found is that our ability to iterate on Terraform and do development of the Terraform configuration was greatly slowed down by our security protocols. So to speed that up, what we did was we stood up Amundsen in the public cloud. And we did that as a means to set up our Terraform environment in a way that we wanted to use eventually in our private cloud. And by putting that in the public cloud, we could destroy and stand up those services without the bottleneck of having to reach out to the security team and make changes that could take 1 or 2 weeks at a time. And so we went from iterating on Amundsen with different versions from 1 or 2 weeks to a matter of like a couple of minutes or an hour. And so without doing that, I'm not sure if we ever would have got to the point where we are today. And a version of that TAP configuration is available on GitHub on this link down here. And then eventually, we settled on this architecture. And I'm sharing this now to possibly help others that are going down the path using Terraform and want to see how to organize the different services within Terraform. And so you can see where we have the different containers included in a Fargate cluster, and we have managed Elasticsearch service. And then we have the various configurations on the right about how we're managing those things within Terraform. And so this concludes the deployment piece of this. And next, I'm going to hand it off to Andy to talk about some of the implementation of it.
Great, thanks, Blaine. Just going to quickly talk about how we're getting data into Amundsen. So as you know, you have to use, or Amundsen provides several, or a data builder package that allows you to essentially extract your metadata, ingest that into Neo4j or whatever database backend you're using, and publishing that in Elasticsearch. So here at One Medical, we are currently indexing a couple of Snowflake-related metadata, Tableau dashboards, and any metadata related to that, as well as user data, which we're grabbing from Workday. And so this is currently configured as an Airflow DAG that runs daily once our batch ETLs are complete for the day. And in this screenshot below, I'll sort of go over like the various components and talk about like what exactly we're bringing in. So starting in the top left, that lineage there is all Snowflake related metadata. So we're bringing in, Snowflake descriptions for your columns and tables. When was your last Snowflake table last updated? We're also bringing in table usage about our various tables, which we are parsing essentially from Snowflake's query history. And finally, we're also bringing in table app in source, which is essentially like for each of our tables, what is the link to the Airflow DAG and what is the link to like the GitHub source code that generates this table. In that middle branch there, where it's all Tableau related metadata. So we're bringing in metadata about our Tableau dashboards, what tables go into each dashboard, and on the right of that is if we have a custom query for a Tableau dashboard, what is the custom query that generates this dashboard? And finally, what is the last modified date for our various dashboards in Tableau? That bottom create users job, again, it's just populating our user metadata. So it's about users within the organization. And again, we're getting that from Workday. And then since this runs every day, we need to ensure that we're moving any stale data that might be out of sync with the latest state of the metadata. And then finally, the last step is just to push all of that stuff out to Elasticsearch to make it searchable. Next slide, please, Blaine. And I sort of want to talk a little bit now about like some customizations we have here or that we've implemented here at One Medical. So we have Amundsen configured with OIDC authentication, especially with Okta as our provider. So it's currently available as a tile in our Okta portal, and the hope is that this will help improve adoption of Amundsen here at One Medical. We're also using custom Docker images for our various services. And this is heavily inspired by the Stemma AI Amundsen custom repo. We also turned off editing of column and table level descriptions in the front end, mostly to help ensure that our warehouse is a source of truth. We don't really want folks going in to essentially make edits, because that might bring the descriptions in the warehouse and Amundsen out of sync. And to sort of help alleviate that, we added we enabled like the request description link, which will essentially send an email notification to our team if people want to request description updates. And this last one is sort of silly, but for the Tableau dashboard extractors, we had to write some custom code essentially to authenticate to the Tableau API via username and password. And the reason for that is because for whatever reason, our IT department, which manages Tableau, they couldn't create an access token for us. And so we had to go down the route of username and password. Next slide, please. So yeah, currently as it stands, we have Amundsen deployed, and we're ingesting data into it. But like Blaine might have alluded to earlier, we're only a few select users are currently using Amundsen. So we still have a lot of work to do to get more people exposed to Amundsen and get folks using it. But I think the first step in achieving that goal is to actually get more data into Amundsen. We have a lot of work actually to populate more table and column comments in our warehouse. Currently, as it stands, it's sort of sparse, and so I think that's the first step. So we want to get more. We want to populate data about our table owners. We also want to eventually visit table lineage so we can see what are the upstream tables used to create our downstream tables. And again, we want to also implement badges on tables and columns, and add tags where necessary to help expedite that data discovery process for it out to our entire medical organization. And I think it'd be awesome if we can find a way to collect user metrics as well, just to see how Amundsen is actually being used at One Medical. One thing that folks here said would be nice is Jira integration within Amundsen to sort of help track issues and bugs related to our various tables. And then one thing that we're also considering and possibly looking into the future is replacing our Neo4j service with either AWS Neptune, which is sort of like a managed AWS graph database, or we also want to see if we can explore maybe the RDS backend, which I think became available a few months ago. And the main reason is just to primarily improve maintenance, so we're not managing Neo4j ourselves as an ECS service. And finally, I think it'd be great if we can add data preview so that folks can easily preview data directly from Amundsen rather than having to go to Snowflake, for example. Next slide, please. And with that, that's currently what we have for Amundsen at One Medical. And we want to open up the floor now for any questions that folks may have.
Questions, I'll ask the first one. You said you have a few users using this. What's the feedback been from them, and what are the things they're loving, and what are the things that they think are missing?
I think from the various feedbacks we've got, they're definitely loving the tool because it enables them to essentially discover the data and look at the data themselves without really having to ask folks questions first. I think one thing that they really enjoyed was actually the query history, because it allows you to see who are the top people who query this table, and then from there they can directly ask questions to those folks to get their answers rather than just pinging an entire Slack channel with their questions. But I think the one thing that folks are requesting more is, hey, can we get more metadata into Amundsen? Because like we mentioned, it's sort of sparse right now, to be honest. We don't have too many table comments and table descriptions. So I think that's the main thing. Another thing that they really loved was the Tableau metadata in Amundsen, especially custom SQL. The reason for that is because I think here at One Medical, if you want to see what's the custom SQL that is being used to power a dashboard, I believe you need a Tableau license or key or something, and for here it's only a limited amount, so not everyone has access to that. But if we can push that out to Amundsen, then it's readily available there, which was something that we also heard that folks would really love if we can get more of that into Amundsen.
That makes sense. There's a question from Ashish, which is around who are the primary users of Amundsen? Are they analysts or compliance folks, someone else?
Well, I would say right now we've exposed Amundsen to a select group of users. So I don't think we have enough feedback from a broader audience. But the expectation is that all of our data users and analysts will be using Amundsen as a way to better enable them to find data.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I would say like folks like data scientists and possibly even like other engineers on other teams who are curious about how some of our warehouse tables are structured or like what kind of data is available in that. So I would say generally just like anyone in the organization who's more curious about data and wants to learn more.
Cool. The other question was what part of the org sponsored this project, which I think translates to what team are you folks in?
Blaine and I are both on the data engineering team here at One Medical.
Yeah, and this is actually, I mean, it's been a long time to get to this point, but I think this started by a hackathon. We had a hackathon at Amundsen. It had just come out a few months prior to that. And there was a lot of positive feedback, and that more or less inspired us to put the effort into finishing up the work to deploy it.
So this is actually, sorry, yeah, I thought I would just like speak up instead of writing those
Yeah,
questions.
please.
So thanks for asking. Thanks for answering the question. My question, which you already answered, my question was more like, was there some part of the org that asked, hey, we need visibility for XYZ use case, and you guys thought, oh, you know, there's a Amundsen out there, we could totally use that and satisfy that use case using the tool. But looks like this came out of a hackathon. So you answered my question. Thanks.
Yeah, we actually did some diligence. We met with some commercial vendors, and so we didn't just settle on Amundsen blindly. And we collected feedback on these other opportunities, and thought that Amundsen made the most sense for us.
Awesome, thanks.
Cool. Any other questions for Blaine or Andy? I'll ask one while we wait. And that is, you folks integrated your Workday user metadata in there. How was that like? That is not a system that many organizations choose to integrate. And so if you could share with the group here, what information you're getting from there and how that's working out for you, that would be great.
I can sort of give like a rundown on how that works. So I believe like as of now, we have an ETL that is extracting Workday data essentially about our employees. And then we have an ETL that actually creates a table in our warehouse in a more queryable format for us. And so what this, what the data builder job that extracts this data is, it's just hitting this table, this final warehouse table that contains information about like the employees like email, first name, last name, what department they're in, what team they're in. So just data about that. And then because we're also bringing in query history into Amundsen, if you go to like a user's page, you'll be able to see, for example, hey, user or employee X has a frequent querier of these various tables. So I think our hope is like, for example, if someone wanted to, if someone were to look up like an employee, they'd be able to see like what team they're in, department they're in, as well as like what frequent tables they have queried in case they might have any questions for them in the future.
Makes sense. Thank you. Ryan has a question. Ryan, you want to ask your question?
Sure. So yeah, you mentioned earlier in your talk that you turned off the UI version of entering descriptions, but then later on you mentioned that right now metadata is still pretty sparse. Wondering if you're feeling like that was a technical limitation that caused you to do that, or if there's more of a business reason why you didn't want to be crowdsourcing.
I think it was, after discussing like internally within the data team, it was more of like a business reason to not be crowdsourcing. And I think our main concern was we sort of wanted to have like a single source of truth for our metadata, which eventually will be, having the metadata in our warehouse, so in Snowflake. And then once it's in Snowflake, just having all that metadata flow down to Amundsen. We didn't really want the metadata to become out of sync between Amundsen and Snowflake. It would be nice to like help crowdsource that metadata, I agree, but I think for us, it was more important to keep the metadata in sync between the two systems. And yeah, we also did have discussions of maybe like trying to do like the reverse way where we do allow users to edit the descriptions for columns and tables in Snowflake, and then maybe, or sorry, not in Snowflake, in Amundsen, and then maybe from Amundsen ingesting the metadata from Amundsen back into Snowflake. But we just felt that the flow from having it from your source database into Amundsen felt more logical to us than from Amundsen back to your database. And that's why we went that path.
I just want to say we should have had a slide about this one, but the data platform ecosystem at One Medical, generally, we start with ETL in Hadoop and Hive, and then we push that up to Snowflake, and then we push that information up to Amundsen in this context. And so our comments come from Hadoop initially, and this just simplifies the process today, but we would like to make this easier for all of our users, because as data engineers, we don't want to be held responsible for maintaining thousands of comments across all these different tables. And but it's a work in progress, and this works for now.
Awesome, thank you. Last question for this talk is from Vikram.
Hey guys, Vikram here. I apologize for all the background noise behind me that you might be hearing. Hopefully I'm still audible enough. My question was around access. So one pattern that we have heard of in a few places is analyst finds some data in a catalog type thing. It's interesting, but it's sensitive, and therefore he or she doesn't have access to it. And there's a process to be followed in order to get access. And then there's also audit and such needs around it. Has that come up? Do you see it coming up? And what are you thinking about in terms of a solution there?
Yeah, and so I think as we have it deployed right now, we have it deployed to a select few set of users. I think we would like to evolve to that point to where we can selectively choose who gets to see data from various tables.
Yeah, if I may pile on, Blaine, Vikram, the way I've seen this done is that discovery of data is open to everybody. So even if you don't have access, you could see an Amundsen page for that table. And then in some cases, I've seen a button being put on Amundsen, which will say request access. And then the request access launches an API call to a different tool, which is usually an internal tool that triggers a request flow for granting access to that particular data set. Is that in line with what you were thinking, Blaine, down the road?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're in the initial stages of using this at One Medical, and I think the access control is something that we want to explore further. We know there's more work left to do there.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Blaine. Thank you, Andy, for coming today and sharing the Amundsen journey at One Medical. Really appreciate it. If you folks have more questions for Andy or Blaine, please hit them up on the Slack channel